Hello everyone. We're going to get started here in about a minute. I see some faces. Well, I see some words of some faces. Hey, Jerry, Philip, Braden, Sean. Let's switch this. So, hey guys, I just wanted to kind of get things warmed up here while I was filling up my cup of coffee. I am set for the next hour. I hope you are as well. Fish Tank Barn. Nice to see you. Hi, Jamie. Hi, Eric. I believe Eric is currently suffering minus 50 degrees where he lives, which is insane. Minus 50 is horrible. When you have minus 50, you can't even make a snowball. I learned that the hard way many years ago. So today's topic is going to be about pegging. And so you might have saw it first. I had shown you some stuff here on the table. So I'm going to get into that. I want to mention that I have a piece of rigid Airline tubing. This stuff comes from PetSmart, Petco, probably cost $1. I don't know. I've had it for a long time. And you're going to cut this up into a bunch of pieces. We also are going to use a 2-part putty, and this is the one that I like. And we're going to use some coral glue. So today I'm going to use the stuff from Polyp Labs, which they just call it premium coral frag glue. You get these little individual tubes. And you will need a drill with a masonry bit that's different from a regular bit. The tip is kind of blunt, and you want this to be slightly larger than the tubing that you're going to use because you need that tubing to fit. And you're going to need a utility knife, and you're going to need some corals. I'm going to have to frag something on the spot. Oh my God, I didn't plan for that. Let me go get a coral cutter. And I'll grab some tongs just in case that also comes up. I got plenty of towels. So I think we're kind of ready. Let me have another sip. Now, lots of you guys are saying hi. I appreciate it. I'm so glad you guys are here. It shows right now, and I always forget to pay attention to this. Right now, we're only a couple minutes in. We're up to 68 people. So that's kind of exciting. Now, the principle of pegging, I just want to say this quickly in case someone's like, oh, I don't care about this, I'm just going to tune out. Pegging is the ability to put corals on a peg and then place it in your reef wherever you want. And this is going to work best if you're doing this with a new tank and you're setting up a new system and you're like, okay, I'm going to use this method that Mark talked about, which means all the rocks on the top of your reef are going to get drilled with a bunch of holes. And we're doing that basically to create places where you could put corals in the future. The benefit of a coral on a peg is if for some reason you need to move that coral later, you can lift it out of the hole and put it in a different hole. It's almost like playing checkers with your corals. And why would you ever have to do that? Well, if you have like, let's say 8 or 10 corals on a rock, as they get bigger, you end up usually having about 3 corals on a rock and you have 7 dead ones. Well, with pegging, you can take the ones out that are too close to their neighbors and put them somewhere else on the reef and let those 3 grow into something really pretty instead of watching things die. Also, if you have a situation like you have an anemone that's reaching up and it's stinging your corals, you could move the corals away from it, from its tentacles, and then when it goes back to its normal hole that it tends to live in, put the corals back in those holes. So pegging is very useful, and it's inexpensive. And it's not difficult. So I'm going to show you guys how that works. I've actually done this in a video before, but we're going to do it on live stream because we haven't done that before. Another thing that I do want to recommend, and I don't want to forget, is rubber gloves. Very important when working with the putty. So be sure that you have some rubber gloves and don't just mix the putty in your bare palms. Okay, let me switch cameras. We're going to start with cutting pegs right off the bat. So I'll switch to this. And we'll turn this slightly a little bit more that way. So all we're going to do, this is, a used piece of tubing that I've just had laying out in the yard. Because why not? And we're going to cut this maybe 2 inches or so. And all you've got to do to cut rigid airline tubing is score it. So we're just going to press down and we're going to turn. And then it's just going to snap, and there's your piece. Very simple. So you make yourself a few pegs. And you don't want them to be too long. If you make this a really long piece, you may end up sticking in the rock and it's sticking out this far out of the rock. And you want it to be all the way in the rock to where all you see is the putty. And we're going to get into that next. So try not to go too crazy. If you make these a little too long, you can trim them, but it's really not necessary. I'd rather just kind of get it right in the first place and not waste any material. So we'll just do 3. All right, there's our 3 little pieces. Then we are going to mix up some putty next, and then we will deal. I'm going to try and get everything ready at once. Now the only thing we're not going to do on camera today is drill holes in rock, and that's because, well, technically I could steal a rock out of the frag tank and demonstrate that too. Do you even want to see that? Let me know in the comments. I'll give you guys a few seconds to decide. And we're going to need a frag of some kind. How about a piece of the Shadowcaster? That's an Acropora. Now, these putties that I use from DD, I love this Aquascape putty. And it's in 2 parts. You're going to rip off an equal amount of each part, and you're going to mix it up until it's uniform in color. I can already feel this stuff on my skin. You don't want to get those chemicals on your skin, so make sure you wear some gloves. All right, so you guys want me to drill the rock. Got it. See, a couple of you got to decide what thousands are later on going to have to endure. That's a lot of pressure. All righty. Got our gloves. We're going to mix up our putty. I only like to make as much putty as I'm going to need for the next, 5 or 10 minutes. You don't want to mix up a giant batch and then have it turn into a rock and be wasted. I've been using this one product now for easily 10 years. One of the reasons I like it is because it works quite well, and because it is purple in color like coralline, so you're not looking at some big white thing or some weird thing in your tank. So here are equal parts of the 2 kinds, and you can see it's kind of gross. Now there is a trick that some people do, I personally don't. You can actually put this stuff in the microwave for a few seconds to soften it. So we're going to combine it, mash it up like a terrible Play-Doh experiment until it's completely one color. And you can put it in your palm, you can press it in, because that's the reason for the gloves. I had a friend who used to do a lot of coral fragging demonstrations, and he made the point, or actually, he was doing this for people without gloves, and during one of his demonstrations, he had to be rushed to the ER. Apparently, he had finally got to the point where he couldn't handle the stuff in his hands anymore, and it actually went into his bloodstream, and they had to treat him. So that's why everyone now wears gloves, because we don't want to be like that guy. So, half of this stuff was purple, and now you can see the entire thing has turned purple. It's got a little bit of white in it, but not much. It's almost completely mixed. That took maybe, 30 seconds? I see a comment from Tim's Tank. No pressure here. Like, yep, we put pressure on you guys to decide what everyone's fate would be. Mute popping sounds. What sound might you be hearing? Is it that my microphone is too loud? Or are you just hearing the background from the reef tank? You guys let me know and I'll try and fix it. Mute the popping sound. I don't know what's causing it. I have no notifications. All right, so our putty is ready. All right. After this point, we can just take our gloves off. I'm going to anyway. I want to fix the sound that's bothering you guys. Let me see if I can turn this down a little bit. Okay, I turned my volume down. Let me know if that stops the popping. Each comment makes a noise. That's so weird because I've got nothing running in the background. Chat pop. So strange. Because we're... Let me see if there's a setting in the software. Because I'm not using any... I'm not using a browser or anything. I'm using the actual software I use each week. And people haven't mentioned any kind of a pop. So... Options. Sound effects. Okay, I just turned off sound effects. Let me know if that fixed it. Hey, green plant. Okay, so do some more chats and let's see if it pops. I mean, this is exactly how we do this every single week. What's going on? Did that solve it? Is it gone? And is my volume too low? Should I turn it back up again, or is it good where it is right now? I think I killed that software thing. Okay. Okay, we got the popping gone. Let me grab a rock. I want a rock. And we're going to go ahead and drill a hole. So we'll grab a rock with one very small anemone. And I'm going to put it here on my bench on a towel to absorb some of the water that's invariably going to go everywhere. Thanks for telling me about the popping sound. I didn't even know that was a thing. All right. Better move my cup of coffee too. Volume is fine. Thank you. Okay. We'll switch cameras again before I get my hands soaking wet. I really want a rock that has no anemone on it. That way we can keep it out of the water for a while. I see a few snails, but that's okay. And hermits. Okay, here's our rock. There's a lot of nooks and crannies in this rock. Put these snails back in the tank. Stay. Come on, I'm on live camera. Hurry up. All right, there we go. So we've got a lot of nooks and crannies, which I will show you what happens with the pegs, and then we will turn around and we will try it with a drilled hole. That would be good. Now, no, I have not done a video on dinoflagellates because I don't have any advice. I got some more gloves because I'm being paranoid. And we need a frag of a coral. I'm going to move this drill out of the way for the moment. Need a tube of glue. And we want to puncture the tube right now so it's ready. I really like this glue. I've tried it out a few times. We're going to do it on camera and we'll see if you like it. So now it is punctured. Yeah, see the tip has got a hole now? This stuff comes from Polyp Labs. I also like the coral glue from Ecotech. Now we need a frag of a coral. Because what's the point of this without a frag, right? Let me switch you guys. Different angle. How about we get one of these up here? I've been kind of thinking, I know it's crazy, but I've been kind of thinking about cutting some frags from the Shadowcaster to create open space on the top. So I'm going to use a pair of bone cutters. I like these a lot. These are my favorite because they come to a curl, they point downward. They're not just flat like a shovel. All right. You're not late. You're here just in time to watch me cut my reef. So we're going to take this frag and we're going to cut it right here. And now we have a piece of the Shadowcaster. It's actually a humongous piece, but that's okay. Switch it back to our spot. Actually, I'm going to move you a little bit closer, hopefully, and keep my arms out of the way. I think that'll work. Now, I'm gonna put the gloves back on, like I said, because of the putty. And our coral is, my hand's wet now, the glove won't fit. I feel like O.J. Simpson. It won't fit. Okay, ancient reference, sorry guys. All right, now we got our gloves, we've got our putty, and we've got our little stick, our peg. What we're gonna do, we take our putty and we press it on the end so that way it is grabbing onto the post. It's nice and secure. It almost looks like a lollipop. And then we want to put a divot in the top here, like a dent. And it's hard for me to do that with my gloves on, but I'm trying to be extra careful here. Let's use a different peg to kind of help shape this a little bit. All right, so now we've got a depression. Almost looks like a really cheap man's replacement tooth. And our coral is going to, whoops, we have 2 frags. Our coral is going to go right into there. But to make it hold better, my trick is to put a daub of glue in there. And then we will dry off the bottom of the frag, just blot it on paper towels or on a cloth towel, press it into the glue, and then while you're still holding it, kind of squish your putty around it so that the putty and the glue is grabbing the coral, and now you have a pegged coral. And that is ready to go into your tank or into your frag system, however you want to handle it. Now, if we went to this rock and we said, okay, I want to put it here, see, it's not really going to want to stay. We can try here, we can try here. See, it's too tall. That one, ooh, that almost works right there. But if you had a little bit of flow, it would knock it right out of there. So that's why we would drill some holes. So I'm going to put this guy down, and we're going to drill a hole. We've got a masonry bit and a battery-powered drill, and the reason for that is if you're using a drill that's plugged into the wall around water, you might get electrocuted, and we want to avoid that. So I'm going to put a hole right about here, and we're going to start off, actually let me get that to drill speed. We start off a little slow to kind of start the hole, and then you're going to have to drill the angle you want the peg to fit. So I've created a very small depression, and I kind of want the frag to be the same as this. So I'm going to hopefully drill this way and keep going that one direction. Now keep in mind that live rock is very porous, and it is possible your entire rock will break. That is something that could happen. But now that we've made that hole, we can slide our coral all the way into its new crater, and that is your first one, your first pegged coral. And then later on, like I said, if you have to move it to a new location, you could then put it in a different hole because you have holes all over the top rocks of your reef. I wouldn't put holes everywhere. You're not trying to turn your reef into Swiss cheese, but the upper rocks are where we tend to put these types of corals, and we do want to be able to move them as necessary. So that, everyone, is how you peg corals. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll be happy to answer them. And that's really it. I mean, I could do this over and over. You know, we'll do one more because I still have a piece of coral left over. So let's drill one more hole, and we will do one more little peg. I seem to have found the dense area. Yeah, it's going in. It's just barely. Yeah, that really doesn't want to go in very far like I was hoping. I might have to pick a different spot because that really wasn't doing it for me. How about this guy right here? You know, it's funny, I actually own a hammer drill. I could have used that and made this a lot easier. Grab another piece of putty. This is actually too much putty. There's enough putty from what I made to make 3 of these pegs. So put it on the end. I had a friend, well, I still do, and he's got a 1,000-gallon reef, and before that he had something big, like 500 gallons or 600 gallons, and he had this giant coral. I mean, it was like, it started here and it went, I'm trying to get on camera, and it branched this way and then went way up. It was a massive coral, and the funny thing was, on the very end was a peg, and he was actually trying to put it back in the hole, which was hilarious because the thing was like 2 feet long. All right, put a little more glue in here. Then we're going to take our coral and blot off the moisture at the bottom, press it into the glue, squish our putty a little bit to hold on. Trying to get that glue on your fingers or you'll be glued to a frag plug. And if you want, you can then dip this in some salt water, like a bowl of salt water, to kind of give it a quick rinse. And then you can just set it in your reef inside of its little hole. So there is our next frag. And you see, this way, the plug kind of matches your rock work. Now, if you want to get crazy aggressive, you could jam it in and actually force the putty to grab onto the rock work in your tank. But I like the ability of being able to remove something later and put it in a new location. So that is how you peg. Guess what, guys? I just put some frags in my frag tank. How weird is that? I'm draining my glove. It is full of water now. All right. Switch cameras. My fingers are wet. Can't control the mouse. So, there we go. I hope that was helpful for you. I see you guys talking about everything else. Hey, I did a post yesterday on Facebook where I warned everyone, if you haven't done it yet, clean out your skimmer, last night, because there's all this weather coming into town, and some of you already have had the weather. And whenever there's a weather change, it will cause your skimmer to overflow. And a lot of people didn't seem to know this, and yet I've talked about on this channel quite a bit, which makes me wonder how closely you guys are listening. Makes me a little concerned. But it's really important that you just go ahead and you empty it out so that all that skimmate sitting in the cup doesn't end up back in your system and back in the sump or back in the entire, reef. So I would highly recommend that whenever you see it, just dump it out, get it back on the body of the skimmer, and don't wait until the darn thing overflows, because you're gonna get to it later. That's the one thing I always warn people. All right, I see a little bit of glue on my towel. It's kind of making my OCD go a little bit crazy. I am going to get a paper towel to blot that up. Because I like these towels, and I'm gonna have this permanent glued spot on here forever now. Should have put that glue on top of a paper towel. All right. See, Dylan said his skimmer went loopy. It's completely normal. It's the barometric pressure of the weather changing will affect the protein skimmer under your aquarium. What else you guys want to talk about today? I'm done. That was my whole presentation. I have not started using no-pox yet. I have to get myself one of those kits for ICP, and I want to send that off, and I want to grab some water on my reef that I think I haven't done a water change in 18 months, and I'm very curious to see what kind of numbers I get on a tank that's been fermenting on its own water for so long. Once I got the sample on its way, I'll go ahead and do the no-pox. And from everything I've read, from all the comments from a lot of people, everyone recommended that I use 50% of the recommended dose for like a couple of weeks. So that is my plan, which means the bottle will last me more than a month. It might last me a month and a half. And that'd be kind of nice. And my nitrates, last time I checked, and I've stopped checking, was around 50. And I have no reason to think it's anywhere down. It's always up. So I am hoping to get my nitrates down to, 10. That would be nice. I'm not trying to hit 0. That's not my goal at all. I just want to reduce it. And if I can get them to come down and then stay around 10, that would make me very happy. And I would hope it would make my tank happy. One of my metal halides just turned off because it's changing colors. I've never used Vibrant, but I've heard of it. A lot of people talk about it. Wow, the comments are moving fast. Hang on just one sec. What did I see here? Brian is asking, let me throw this on the screen. When you're using super glue gel or putty in your system, will this shrink? No. It really won't. Okay, anyway. There we go. If you're using super glue gel or if you're using putty, will it affect your skimmer? Can you get it off the rockwork later? Yes, you can. Grab your bone cutters, and go snip, 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 and you can just chisel it right off. Not a problem. Wow, that thing is ginormous and silly. Any advice for getting rid of pink cotton candy algae in a refugium would be to get Mexican turbo snails. I believe that's correct. You can check my Critter ID page. In the algae section, I have pink cotton candy algae, the picture, and I show the critter, and I'm almost positive it's the giant Mexican turbo snails. They're the only ones that eat it. Garrett is suggesting something called denitrate material. I've actually tried the brick thing. It didn't work out in my system, and I want to try Nopox because I've never used it before. And that's one of the reasons why I ordered some. I wanted to see what it's like because a lot of people talk about it. It's not a brand new product. It's been around for a while, but I've never used it. And I thought, hey, if it works, I can say good things about it. So it's sort of like when somebody says, have you used Vibrant? They want to know my opinion. So I'm going to see if Nopox works. And I'm thinking it'll work. There's no guarantees, but there's a good chance. I see Victoria is mentioning about, and I'll put it on the screen. We'll see what it does. So crazy how it makes the icon so large and the word so small. The holes sometimes aren't big enough in your rock work for the frag plugs. And so what we want to do, actually I'm going to take this and just move it a little bit over there. If you can drill larger holes into your rock work to accommodate frag plugs, or you can take the frag plug itself and you can cut off the bottom so you just have a disc, and then you can use glue or putty to hold that disc in place. Frank asks, how long can you keep frags out of water? I'd say about 10 minutes. Oh, also, if you're doing the pegging technique and you're using this putty, don't do a lot in one single session. If you're, let's pretend you have a 29-gallon tank and you want to mount 15 frags. I would not mount 15 frags in one day in that small amount of water. I would mount maybe 5 and then wait a day and then do 5 more and then wait a day or 2 and then do 5 more. Because the chemical coming off this stuff can drive your skimmer crazy and it can affect your system. And we don't want that to happen. We want you to instead take your time. So put all your brand new frags down on the sand bed, and then, like the next day you can secure a few on the rock, or you can do the pegging method if that's what you like to do. But just don't let all that chemical get in your system at once. It'll affect your protein skimmer, it can affect the water quality, and it can affect your livestock because it's just too much at one time. So just do a little bit at a time. Dan asked me if I'm using Bio Pellets. I am not. I did them for about 2 or 3 years. I'm trying something different. Have I ever used Aptasia X from Red Sea and did it work? Yeah, actually I've used it a lot. I have a huge bottle of it that I bought off of Amazon. And then I would, because it's such a big bottle, I would pour it into the little tiny bottle that they normally sell it in, so I could put that near my tank. And then even then, and because I kept buying so much of it, I had a lot of those syringes. And I would fill up like 5 or 6 syringes because I have a huge tank. I can get away with this. And that way I could have all my syringes lined up on the edge of my tank, and I could grab them and work on a few Aptasia, and then work on the next group, and then work on the next group until I hit them all. And that was my method. But again, I seem to be able to do things because my tank is so big that you guys cannot emulate to that degree. So instead, be very careful, use your one syringe at a time, check on the tank, maybe give it a break, come back to it a little while later instead of being super aggressive and doing it all in one day. And also, whenever you've got your bottle of the Aptasia X and you pull the syringe, to fill it up with the fluid, be very careful you don't drop the bottle into your tank. So as soon as I get that syringe filled, I put the syringe down somewhere safe, I screw the cap back on the bottle and put it in the back away from my arm where I can't bump it. And that way I avoid the risk of polluting my tank with a horrible accident. I mean, I've never done it, but odds are it would not be good for your tank to accidentally spill it in there like that. Steven asks, he had just finished cycling his reef, wants to know how soon can he add his phytoplankton and pods. It's not really a rush. I probably wouldn't put them in until about 3 months in. I don't think that they would survive long in a new barren tank. There's nothing to eat. You just set up a new tank with dry rock, dry sand. You added some salt water. It's basically devoid of life. And I know you cycled it, so you got some bacteria in there, but there's just nothing in there for these animals to snack on. And the phytoplankton, it's not going to stay there alive. It's going to break down or be pulled out in the filtration. So I don't really see the point of adding any of that stuff to your tank for about the first 3 months. And after that, then you got some livestock that needs it. That would be a good time to put it in your system. Could you make a video on how to fix bigger corals in existing reef? Everyone explains it with little frags. Also straight to the rock in the aquarium and not fixing on the rock outside. Did you happen to see my video where we took the 4-foot coral out of my reef? That one, now we were taking it out, you're talking about putting it in. When you're trying to secure larger corals in your tank, you're going to probably have to use quite a bit of putty. Maybe putty, putty, and putty in 3 different spots to kind of secure it to the rock. You may need to adjust your rock work to support that coral so it fits into a little niche. That would be useful too. It's kind of hard to put big corals in a new tank or in it just looks weird. It's almost best to start off a tank with tiny frags that grow in. It just seems to look right aesthetically, but your tank looks empty forever too. So I could see how you would want to put in something bigger, something the size of a baseball. And it is doable. Sometimes it's just a matter of placing them in an ideal spot. And again, I use the putty. And if you're worried the putty's not working, like I was saying, you can make the putty, put glue, put the coral on top, and take the whole darn thing and mash it in the tank, and then press the putty into your rock work. And that should do what you're asking for. Kev said that he just recently got no-pox himself, and he's going to try it out, but he's trying to bring down phosphate. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what happens for you. Let me know. Everyone seems to really rely on no-pox to get rid of nitrate primarily. I mean, obviously it removes both, and my tank has both. I checked my phosphates today, and they're up again because I just feed way too much. And so I've got to treat my tank yet again to bring them down. David asks, what's my recommendation on the Jaybo dosing pump? My recommendation would be to talk to someone that has a Jaybo dosing pump. I have not used that one. Nate asked me if I'd show my tank. I don't know that it's worth showing through a webcam. I think you're better off just watching my videos that are edited and look nice. Webcams are low res, even at 1080p. Chris Hayes asked, have I tried carbon dosing like vinegar, vodka, or sugar? Was it successful in reducing nitrates? Yes, I have a vodka dosing article on my website, and I did it for 2 or 3 years. And the first 7 months of dosing every single day, like clockwork, according to schedule, nothing happened. And it was after 7 complete months that my nitrates dropped like a rock, like overnight. And they were like 80. And they came all the way down to 0. It was fantastic. I was super happy. I was very frustrated how long I was waiting, but then it just plummeted. It finally hit that tipping point. And that worked really well. And then I kept doing what you would call a maintenance dose, which is usually 50% of what you were dosing. And that's just to keep it down. Mine kind of rose a little bit, but I did that for a while. And then, Bio Pellets came out, and so I switched to that. And then I wanted to try out the brick. And, I used one from Brightwell that just didn't work for me. So I am, now I'm wanting to try Nopox. I like to try some of these different products. And if something doesn't work for me, I mean, here's the thing. There's probably going to be 15 people out there that swear the brick worked perfectly for them and did exactly what they wanted. But it didn't work for me. So I get to choose something else, like vodka or the vinegar, sugar dosing. Or I can, try Nopox, which might actually be vodka and vinegar and sugar and all combined. Who knows? I don't know what's in that bottle. Somebody's been saying it's methanol. And they're saying just buy your own methanol and make it yourself. Well, I kind of don't really mind using products made for the aquarium. That doesn't bother me. I get it. I understand why people do it, and I understand how it saves you money. But at the same time, if I'm making my own concoction of something and have a success story, I might share that with you, and you might try to copy that, and then everything goes wrong. I've been talking about this product for years. Phosphate RX. And this stuff, you just drip it in your tank, and it makes your phosphates go away, and I love it. But there's a few people out there that have bad experiences. But there's a lot of people that use it, and they're very happy. Another one, I got a message today from a guy. His name is Ron, and he's out there in San Diego. And he had cyano in his tank, and I told him, you need red cyano RX. And so he finally said, okay, I'm going to buy it. I've never used it, but I'm going to trust you. And he wrote me a message today. He says, Mark, that stuff was amazing. I'm so happy. I'm so glad. I've been in this hobby since 1980, and I'm still learning new things. And, using red cyano RX or ChemiClean, either of those, I highly recommend it. I tell everyone use it. I don't fear it. I really recommend it. You have a cyano problem? Solve it. I want to mention something. I have a theory. Let me get the product real quick. So you guys have heard me talk about the Benepet's food, which is called Benereef. And this stuff right here is a super fine powder that you mix up with some tank water, let it sit for 5 minutes, and then you pour it in your tank. And the food is really, really tiny, and it feeds your corals. The fish go crazy, but they can't eat it because they can't see it. It's just dust. But I have this theory that I'm going to try to prove over the next 4 weeks. What I've noticed, and I want to recreate it, and I want to see if it happens. And if you have this stuff, please do the same thing. Let me know. Normally, don't use this. Just feed your tank like you usually do. And I look at the front glass, and after 2 or 3 days, it either turns green or it turns brown, depending on phosphate levels and nutrients in the water and algae growing. But I have noticed a few times after using this, like a day later or 2 days later, there's less algae on the glass. It's like thinner, and it's barely there. And I was wondering, what if I use this every 2 days in my tank so I hardly ever have to clean my glass? Wouldn't that be awesome? And I'd get some corals to grow a little faster. So that's my theory. And I'm going to try it out to see if I'm right about this, because it's just such a weird thing. When you don't do anything in your tank, you don't clean out your skimmer, you didn't run carbon, you didn't do a water change, you didn't do anything, and yet the stuff you see in the glass seems to be going away. Now, how could that even happen with this stuff? Well, this stuff, this food, which I still have that camera hooked up. I don't like tilting jars toward my laptop. So we are going to do this. You can see it's just a very fine powder. And this stuff has bacteria in it. And I think that maybe the bacteria that you bring to life when you put it in salt water is what's snacking on the stuff on the glass. So I want to see if I'm right. And I talked to Dwayne, because Dwayne used the heck out of it. He says, yeah, I barely clean my glass like once a week. It's a pretty good selling point to me. If I can just put in a tablespoon, and that's what I'm using a tablespoon for my entire tank. And, so you have a smaller tank, I don't know what you're going to use, 1/8 of a teaspoon, whatever it says to use. I mean, the thing has instructions on here. A 1/4 teaspoon per what? See, that's the problem. A quarter teaspoon treats 25, it says treats. I hate the word treats. This is food. A quarter teaspoon per 25 gallons. So if you have a little all-in-one tank that's 25 gallons, 29 gallons, you could use a quarter teaspoon mixed with like a half a teaspoon of salt water. I mean, just a little bit of water. It doesn't take much. And in my case, I use a Dixie cup and I put in my tablespoon and I scoop some water out of the tank and I stir it and I let it sit for 5 minutes. I set the timer on my watch so I don't forget. When my wrist is vibrating, I know it's done. I can go ahead and just take the food and I just pour it in my tank. And I'm not even turning off the protein skimmer or anything. I'm just like letting the reef eat, and then whatever gets pulled out of the filtration gets pulled out. Okay, I stopped answering all your questions. I apologize. Let me get back to those. Gavin said that he's having a hard time keeping copper band butterflies. Welcome to the hobby. Brian asked me, how do you like your random flow nozzles? And are you going to be at Aquascape this year? The first question, I love them. I'm very impressed with them. And the most interesting effect I've noticed so far is that my anemone, my anthias just flew through the air. My anemone has tucked down in the rockwork and stayed there for, well, since I put them in. Was that 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago? But it has stayed down instead of reaching way up. And so what's happened is, you know that whole area of coral death that the anemone stays in the middle of? I can see it all. The cage is visible because the anemone has shrunk down because it's getting hit with this random flow, which is very interesting to me. And I don't think it's a bad thing. I think it's a good thing. So in the meantime, my corals are growing and they're healthy, and I have nothing to be upset about. And in Aquascape, yes, I'm going to be there. The one in Dallas, I'm going to be there. I'm also going to be at ReefWorks in February in Seattle. And I will, of course, be at MACNA in September in Orlando, Florida. I'm going to be in Florida on February 26th for the FMAS club meeting. Whatever our DFW Mass meeting is here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, I'll be going to that, of course. So you can find me in any of those places. How many bristleworms are too many for a 290-gallon soft coral? And I don't know what the next word is. But too many would be when all you see is worms everywhere. And if you just see a few worms, that's okay. If you see hundreds and hundreds of worms, and let me add a caveat. If you see the worms right when you feed, that doesn't count because you triggered a feeding response, so they're all going to come out of the woodwork. But if you just normally look in your tank and you see 2 or 3, it's no big deal. If you're seeing hundreds all the time, you might want to reduce their population. Bristleworms are part of the detrivore kit. They are eating detritus. They're eating decaying matter. If you have something die in your tank, they will devour it and it'll be gone. And that is not a bad thing. But I remember many years ago, I had some girl was over here and she was watching me feed my 29-gallon and she goes, ugh. And I was like, what? And she says, there's worms everywhere. And you know, they never bothered me, not even a little bit. And I just didn't see them. And when she pointed it out, now I was super aware of it. So I ended up adding a long-nosed hawkfish and an arrow crab. And both of those two guys worked on the reef to reduce their population. It didn't get rid of all of them, but they got rid of the majority of them and kind of kept their population in check. And so that is one way to kind of handle it. And those both would be safe in your soft coral tank. James said, I just put my rockwork together with pegs and had a time drilling out all those holes. Yeah, well, sometimes you're going to hit really easy spots on the rock. Sometimes it's going to be very, very dense. And, you know, you might have to use multiple bits. You might even need a better bit than the cheap one that comes in those all-in-one kits. They always come with one that barely drills in the mortar of brickwork one time. And it also comes down to how large the hole has to be, depending on the size of the rods you're using to fasten your rockwork together. But that's another form of pegging, I guess. But this pegging method, I didn't invent it. Some guy, I think it was up in Canada, shared this a long time ago, and I thought it was brilliant. You know, at the time, my reef was rocking and rolling. It was full of corals. I didn't need it. But I thought, that's really neat. I'm going to do that with my next tank. And then when I set up the 400, all the top layer rocks had a bunch of holes drilled in them for the pegs. And that was my master plan. And it worked really well. Then the tank leaked, and I had to take everything down, take all the rock out, and through the shuffle and the moving everything around and corals growing and finally setting up the new tank again, those rocks with all their holes kind of got probably put on the bottom. So I didn't peg this time. But, you know, it's still a neat technique, and I feel like you guys could definitely do it. And my 2 frags over there are still doing their job perfectly. It's going to be very blue, but let's see if I can get you guys close enough. Whew, almost unplugged it. Let's see if this works. This may not work. We're going to try it anyway. So we'll tilt this up. So there's one frag right there. And then the second one's right here. Right there. Not the best looking frag tank, but it's full of coralline. I've got the coralline part down to a science. Not a problem. All right. Have you ever kept an elegance coral? Any advice on how often I should feed it? I do it twice a week. Is that sufficient? I've never kept an elegance coral. I've been tempted, and I've had a few friends say, what were you thinking? So I didn't do it. Elegance corals are beautiful, but they put out these sweepers that will kill their neighbors. And I had this one spot where I thought would be great for one, but again, my friends talked me out of it, so I didn't do it. How often it needs to be fed? If you're using something like Benereef, you know, a powder that's in the water, it'll get a meal. If you're trying to target feed it with some kind of solid foods, you know, whether that's pellet food, flake, frozen, mini mysis, I don't think I don't know, but I don't think you'd use anything like krill. I think it's too big. But a couple of times a week would be a good starting point, but you might decide you need to do it a little more frequently. And you want to make sure that the coral has enough time to capture the food so the flow doesn't just wash it away. That's why something that's like a broadcast food like this, and this doesn't have to be broadcast fed. You can actually physically feed this directly to corals by mixing it in a slurry so it's very dense, and then put it in a pipette or in a syringe or one of those turkey baster things. And you could then squirt the food at the exact coral you're aiming at with the flow turned off in the tank for 10, 15 minutes. Set a timer so you do not forget, and then turn your pumps back on. Hey, look at this. Rossi says that no pox is 375 milliliters of vinegar, 500 milliliters of vodka, and 125 milliliters of RODI water. Very interesting. I don't know how you broke that down, but there you go. So you see, it would be cheaper to make my own. Rob's telling me that the hinge on my door is up. You're right. And I've noticed that, and I haven't pushed it down. I think, and I was trying to figure out why on earth it was up. And I believe that what happened was I was trying to get this big poly tank out of this room, and I tried everything, including remove the door casing, and the container is just too darn big, and it just can't come out. So there's my ginormous container. And that is what I'm going to be mixing up with salt water here shortly. It's full of water. It's been full of water for a month. I need to add the salt to it. I got to crawl up a ladder and dump it in. It's a big pain in the butt. Someone asked why there's no rose bubble tips on sale anywhere. I would say they're somewhere. Everyone sells those. Can you build custom sumps? I actually do. He asked me what type files do I use that are router ready. The software I use makes a CRV file, and then once it's in there and I trace all the cutting paths, it comes out, I believe, as a text file. But I would just have to see it to see if I can build it. It's not a matter of getting the artwork. I mean, that's great, but I need to see if it's something I actually build. Some of the things that people ask me for very specifically are like adjustable baffles, and I don't do that. I build it to fit your equipment. Quit adjusting stuff. That's interesting. Thomas says CyanoRx is an antibiotic, so it's not allowed in Germany. I had not heard that it wasn't allowed over there. Wow. And Garrett, I am assuming you're talking about the Benereef made your hydroids break out in the tank. Well, it makes sense. Anything that's in your tank that can eat is going to eat it. And so I could imagine something that's a pest would eat it and grow. So, I mean, if you're feeding your entire reef this stuff, and you have some Aptasia, and you have some frog spawn, and you have some bird's nest, and you have some hydroids, well, they're all going to equally grow based on food supply. So you're going to have to pull things out. Canadian Reefer Girl is here, everyone. My snails and crabs had babies when something bad happens like velvet. Waiting it out, and now everything is breeding. Oh, so you're saying that the tank is fishless, there's no predators, and now you have a bajillion snails? That's awesome. Congratulations. Something else to look at while you're waiting for the fish to be healthy. Have you tried out the Fritz glass cleaner yet? I have used it. I believe I've used it on glass and on acrylic. It works just fine. I thought I had a bottle down here. Or up there. I don't know. I have a couple of different glass cleaners here. I don't use Windex. Hey, that's cool. Dharma says that they've been using Benepets for the last 2 weeks, and they also confirm they're seeing less algae on the glass. So isn't that interesting that putting a certain food in your tank with the extra probiotics that are in there is helping devour algae off the glass? I think that's awesome. And I don't have algae problems in my rockwork either. I mean, if you look hard enough, you'll see things growing, but it's not like, oh my God, I have such a farm of algae. You know, that's not my problem ever. Someone asked if they see a triggerfish. Nope, don't have one. That one I answered already. I think it was a repeat question. Hello, Chimp. Chimp the Reefer. What a great name. Oh, there's something in Russian. I don't know what it says. I'm sorry. I'll have to translate that later. Still scrolling. One day I want to go up to Canada. I want to see what the big deal is up there. Why are there people living there? Kev asks, is there any specific requirements for the blonde Nassau beyond normal Tang care? I can tell you that my Nassau is a puppy dog that can get moody. And she can move so fast if she is so inclined. She will literally go the full length of my tank in the blink of an eye if she's pissed off. She can turn completely black when she's upset. She can turn completely white like a ghost, like crazy white. But most of the time she looks her normal color. And she's always near me. She always wants to get in the camera frame. She's super cute. Hi there. Hi. I can wave to her and she'll do her fin back. I've hand fed her. I don't hold her. I don't hold fish. And I'm a little bit jealous of people that can. I mean, there's a benefit. Like if you have to remove one, they get used to your hand. You can get in your hand, just take it out. But I don't want to rub off their slime coat on fish. And in the case of Spock, I've had to catch her a few times because tanks kept leaking. I had to keep moving her. And it was really hard to catch this giant fish. And I tried it with a big net one time, and I didn't like that. I didn't like her reaction. And so I instead have a very large acrylic box. And I'll, like a quarantine tank or something, I'll lower it into my reef and I'll shoo her into that. And then I lift the entire box up, which is very heavy, full of water, and then pour her into the next vessel. And because she has been in my 280, then she went into a 100-gallon poly tank, then she went into the 400, then the 400 leaked and she went into a 215 that was back there. And then when this tank was replaced, then she had to go from the 215 back into this tank. So she's been moved and plus when I got her, she was living in the 280 at a different house. So she had to be caught that time, years ago, way back in 2004, and put in a trash can. So she's been through like 5, 6 different spots over the years. But they love nori. They want to eat all the time. I can tell you, I mean, I'm just telling you her quirks. I don't know if all Nassos do the same thing. But I do remember at one point I put in something like 30 chromas because I thought that'd be really pretty. And she went into her corner and she wouldn't come out for 3 days. And I was like, wow, they really bother you. And then finally she was like, God, they're not going away. I guess I'll have to come out and swim with these bastards. Which just cracks me up. But I didn't get a bunch more chromas after that. You know, as they dwindled away, she got happier and happier. She tends to break corals. She is a bulldozer. She can just snap something off because she's swimming through there and she doesn't care what's in her way. But no, that's pretty much it. And I've never tried to have a second Nasso in there for her to have a courtship with. What's your go-to coral dip and process if you're to implement it, if you're to buy new coral before going into your main system? I have been using Revive forever, and I just grab a scoop of water out of my reef. After the coral's been acclimated to the water, which is literally temperature acclimation, so in 20 minutes the bag's the same temperature, and then I just rip it open, put it in the bowl with the tank water. I put Revive in first and stir it around and put the coral in there. I set a timer for 15 minutes. And then after 15 minutes has elapsed, I turkey baste it from all angles, and then it goes into one of these 2 tanks. Sometimes the anemone cube. That's happened. That's why there's corals in the bottom of the anemone cube. There's a lot of other dips on the market. This is one I tried out last year. I just haven't been getting more corals. But Zero Dip is another, and boy, this stuff smells really strongly of something I recognize. Kind of reminds me of, and probably has tea tree oil in it. They don't always tell you what's in these things, but it's an effective blend of targeted and effective ingredients that will kill and remove pesky creatures that put your pets at risk. Okay, that sounds like a sales pitch. But I did use it, and it did knock things off the corals. And basically you want to put corals in your tank without the pests. What's the best way to remove spiderweb worms? You're talking about vermitids, and that would be to break off the tube and rip the worm out with like a dental tool. Or if you can't do that, if you can just go ahead and put glue on the hole to seal the worm inside the hole, it'll just die in there. And that can stop it. If you have tons of them, you're gonna have a lot of work ahead of you. If you have a few, you can kind of deal with it now before it gets out of hand. And Gardening in Sweden said something nice. I agree. Let's see if this comes on screen. I think that coral keeping is very important today when corals are dying in the oceans. And all the stuff that we're doing these days may help restore the reefs at one point when we put them back into the ocean to replace what's been lost. And some of that work is being done now. There are certain corals that are being grown in labs and then returned or planted on oceans to help restore areas. Unfortunately, we just have so much going against us when it comes to that. I mean, there's always a risk of taking something out of the ocean, growing it in a closed ecosystem, and bringing it back to the ocean and bringing some horrible pest into the area you're trying to restore. But at the same time, if we do nothing, then whatever's left in the ocean is a finite amount. I mean, it's not going to just keep replenishing itself, especially as the temperature goes up in the water and the pollution hits the water and the CO2 gases grow on the planet. I mean, we have so many big issues to deal with. I would love to see that all start going the other direction, but it's going to take a lot of work on the part of the governments to make this happen, even though we as individuals can do things like don't throw your trash in the ocean, which I've never done, but apparently it's a thing. Do you think that the ban on exports of corals from various regions has made corals more expensive? Yeah, I guess. And I think it also allows vendors to get away with charging more. Because like, oh, you know, we can't get this anymore, so you need to pay $900 for this. That won't make me buy it any quicker, I can tell you that. I like to get corals from other people, so it doesn't affect me in that regard. You know, I I visit Dwayne, I visit Jimmy, I visit Tammy, you know, I visit Ryan. These are people with big reef tanks full of corals, and they go snip, 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 and I come home with frags. It's awesome. And when they come here, I snip a few things out of my tank for their tanks. And you know, we've been sharing corals for the last few years, and it's been a great system. But I do, I mentioned this on Facebook last night in Club Me Loves Reef. Let me throw this on the screen. We have a great group. There's almost 3,500 people in it on Facebook. It's facebook.com/groups/Me Loves Reef. And if you go to that group, we talk about aquariums. And it's great because we don't fight, we don't attack. I don't allow it. And so in the group last night, I mentioned that I have a can frag I bought a couple months ago. And I put it up my reef, and then my reef decided to kill it. And then it rolled off and went down on the sand bed, and that was that. And I thought, wow, that was a waste of $80. And I was annoyed at myself. And then I looked in my tank last night at that same frag plug that's been laying on the bottom of the sand, you know, kind of ignored. And there's 3 polyps of acan coming off of it. So yay, I guess a little bit of life survived, and it's hanging in there. And because our lighting is so great right now, I'm gonna grab this camera real quick. I'm gonna show you what it looks like. So let me switch to this one, and we're gonna try and show you. So right back there, do you see that acan? I mean, it's not great, but it's not dead. You know, there's some life there. You were focused and then you choose not to? You little cooperate. Oh, anyway, you get the idea. It was a nice surprise for me because it wasn't $80 lost. It was $60 lost. There's $20 left. So, okay. But yeah, I mean, yes, when things no longer exist, the price will go up. And that's just nature of the way society is. But at the same time, there's a lot of other choices of things we can get. Maybe pick what you can afford, pick what you want. And don't get upset if you can't afford something. Ken asked me, how big a sump can I build? The biggest sump I built was 8 feet long, and it was really heavy. It was hard. But it comes down to how to get it to you, or can you come pick it up? If you are picking it up in person, I don't care what the size is. I mean, obviously, if it's longer than 8 feet, we may have to have a conversation. But if you can pick it up and not have to ship it, size isn't an issue at all. Adam is saying, I wish you had suggestions for dinos. I think I talk about this for like a minute every single week. My biggest advice, no water changes, high pH of 8.5, siphon out all that you can, remove everything that has dinos on it that's plumbing, you know, pumps, lock line, elbows, magnets, frag racks, anything it's on, remove those if they're removable in any form or fashion, clean them off and put them back in the tank. Reduce your lighting period to maybe 3-4 hours a day of intense light. I know you can go pitch dark for 3 days in a row. That can weaken it, but it doesn't kill them. And you can dose hydrogen peroxide, which should be 1 milliliter per 10 gallons of water. But I've never let it get to the point I've seen in some people's tanks where it's just like a nightmare and like, hey, can someone help me? I'm like, oh my God, where were you 6 weeks ago when it was barely starting? But those are I mean, that's not a cure. That's just kind of like things I've done. It's not great advice, so I don't really do a topic on it because I don't have a great solution. There's a product on the market called Dino X from Fauna Marin, and they say it will work, and it takes 3 weeks, and you put it in your tank, and you let it ferment, and I think you don't run your skimmer the entire time, and the stuff will die. And if that is the cure, then I'm going to tell everyone use that, just so it's solved. I want a solution that's forever. You know, I just want to say, this works in every tank we've done it in. That would be awesome. I'd love to invent it just to say we have a solution. Not so I could say, oh, I cornered the market and made all the money on it, because I don't care. But I do wish that there was something on the market that we know works, and we could tell everyone to do it and they'd be happy, like I do with phosphates, or like I do with, I don't know, pure water as an RODI system. Compy is saying, I'm contemplating to dose sugar or vinegar to lower my phosphates and nitrates a little, but don't know how much to dose. You're going to have to do some homework on Google. I know it'd be great if we could just say, oh, use a 1/4 teaspoon, but that's very vague, and we don't know all your circumstances. So I would do your reading. on vodka dosing or on sugar dosing or VSV dosing, which happened 15 years ago. And by now there's tons of threads and articles on that topic, and you can read up on all that, see what makes sense to you, see what's logical, follow their recipe. Don't try anything that's quick. Quick never works. And in theory, you should have success if you're patiently sticking to the rules. This t-shirt that I'm wearing right now is sold by a vendor that I believe is in Australia. It says Eat, Sleep, Reef, Repeat, and it's on Amazon. So you should be able to find a whole collection of shirts from this guy. He sent me this one a while back, and I put the link to his shop on one of my live streams. I don't know if you want to go to that much work to go through all my live streams trying to find the link to this t-shirt, but it's on Amazon. Maybe just put in this title, Eat, Sleep, Reef, Repeat t-shirt, and maybe you'll find the link really easy that way. But he has about 30 shirts on there, and I really like this one. I wear it all the time because it's super comfortable, and the words match my life. My clown used to let me pet him even though I didn't really try to, then had to move him one day, but I couldn't catch him with a net to save my life. That sounds about right. Yeah, they know the net is evil. It takes you to the dark side. Are vermitids bad? Well, they're just a worm, and they're an opportunistic worm that wants to get a meal. So whenever you throw food in the tank or you have an auto feeder drop in food, the worm will cast a net or a web into the water, hoping food will stick to it, and then if you watch, he will, with his jaws, he will just eat his web filled with food. And that's what they do. It's not a big deal, but if they keep casting the web on your coral over and over and over, the coral gets irritated and it could even die. So, or it could lose color. One of those two things can happen. So that's why typically we don't want them in our tank, because they can be a pain. I have had a few in my system, and when I say few, I mean 4, 5 in a 400-gallon tank, or I'd see 3 really cool ones in my refugium, which who cares if they're down there. Or I saw some, I saw 1 or 2 on my return lines, where the water's flowing in. They were way up there. I'm like, okay, that's fine. And I just took pictures of them. I didn't think they were a problem. But when I did the demonstration of how I changed out those flow accelerators with the VCA brand, I dipped everything in acid and I scraped off everything off the pipe. So it's like brand new again. But they're not really evil, they just kind of irritate. Just like Aptasia can sting corals you care about. That's why we don't want Aptasia in our tank. Hey Mark, how do you keep your aquarium tools clean? Like the bone cutters, the metal tongs. These I've had for probably 10 plus years. And matter of fact, for the entire 10 years, this little spring thing is absolutely worthless. It doesn't do anything to help to assist me. They're like there for decoration. And I just rinse them in water in the sink, and then I set them on the drying rack to dry. And they don't look that bad. They're not really rusty. This one here is actually in pretty good shape too. There's a few little tiny rust spots, but that's pretty much it. I always rinse and I put it away. I try not to do anything silly like leave it on the rim of the tank where it's getting hit with salt and moisture nonstop that will erode it. If something gets really ruined, I toss it and I get a new one. I am not a fan of picking up rusty tools. I like things that are clean and new, and I try to keep them looking good. Occasionally I'll oil this. And I did find a new pair of this exact kind at Macna last year. I was really happy. They had like hundreds of them, all these different kinds, and I went through everything they had to find the one with the curved tip, because that's what I wanted. I love that because you can get down into the nooks and crannies. Like if you're trying to trim out an Aptasia or a Mahano, you can get in there with a flat, blunt one. You just really can't. And I was lucky to find one in her entire collection. And I think it was part of those zipper kits. And I was like, can I have just that? And she said yes. And that was nice. So I was able to buy it. And I still paid 15, 12, 20. I don't know what I paid. I just said, here's my card. That's what I want. Scott asked, did you get my online request for a quote for a custom ATO container? If I haven't replied yet, I may not have seen it, or I didn't get it. So feel free to send it again today and I will look. I'm not going to lie to you. When I get a lot of orders, like a big backlog, This is a terrible way to run a business. But when I get a big backlog of orders and I have 15 people waiting on something from me, I kind of, I can't believe I'm admitting this on YouTube, but I kind of stop answering emails because I want to take care of the 15 people. And anyone running a business would, every email is money, do it, do it, do it. But I'm like, no, I got to take care of these people because I want them to be happy. And then as I lighten my load, I'm like, okay, let's look for new orders. And I start answering emails again. That's a terrible system. And I've got to break the habit. And I'm just being honest with you guys. That's how I do it. I'm a bad businessman. But I do care. So yeah, hit me up again. I'll answer you and I'll get back to you. And I'll build it if I can. I have a question. This name, I can't even say it. Oh, I have no idea how to say that. Guilherme. Oh. I just dropped some carbon inside my tank accidentally, and it got in the rocks. Is it going to kill my tank if it's left there? No, actually it won't. Carbon will not hurt your tank. If you accidentally spill some in your reef, or it goes into the sand, or it goes in the rocks, it's just ugly. It is carbon. It is not carbon dosing, and it's just kind of an eyesore. You can just kind of work on systematically removing it as best you can, if you can, or otherwise it's just in your reef, and that's the end of it. But no, it's not going to poison your system. Do you feed vegetables and fruits to your tank? Vegetables. You can feed tangs blanched broccoli. And blanched means you put it in boiling water for like 10 or 15 seconds. That's just to like burn off any kind of possible contagions. And then you can put that in on a feeding clip and let your tangs just nibble at the broccoli. But I think I've only done that once in 20 years. I love to occasionally put banana in my reef, and everyone thinks I'm bananas for doing it. But all my fish get super excited. Spock loves it. The purple tang loves it. All the skunk clownfish start eating it. The anthias come eat it. I mean, you would think banana's a random one, but then again, there are reefs that surrounding islands that have lagoons, and those islands have bananas and they have coconuts, and these things end up in the ocean one way or another, whether it's from humans or storms and hurricanes, for example, and that stuff hits the water and they eat it. So I don't take a whole banana and put it in. I will pinch off a piece at the end and I will mash it in my fingers under the water so it kind of just breaks up and goes everywhere, and all the fish chase it down and gobble it up. And I have held a chunk in my fingers and let Spock just bite until she gets her belly full. She loves it. And I say loves it because I've shared this before, but if you're new to my channel, you haven't heard it. I was sitting in the living room eating a banana one day, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw this weird activity, and I looked, and Spock, my Nassau Tang, was just like this, back and forth in the glass, like, what are you doing, and why aren't you sharing with me? And I was like, you can see this from this far away? Because I was 8 feet away from the tank. And, I kind of held it up, and she's like, yeah. And I was like, wow. So I took the cover down, and I pulled a piece off, and she was happy again. But it was hilarious that she saw me eating the banana and got mad at me. So, yes, I do give fruit to my fish on occasion. Jamie asks or says, I have a 280-gallon tank that is 10 years old, never filled with water. Should I take a chance to fill it, or is it too old? And if it's not too old, should I drill holes for a sump? Wow. The problem with a tank that's been sitting a long time is the silicone can get brittle because it didn't have moisture on it to keep it, let's call it flexible. So there's a chance it may not hold water long term. You could do a water test, you could fill it with water and you could watch it for a week or two and it might be totally fine. Then you bring it into your house, you install it, you set it up, you do everything you want to do, and 3 months from now it springs a leak. I mean, there is a chance. And I hate to be that kind of person. And it was one of the reasons why I never bought a backup tank. I got this 400 gallon. Why not get another 400 built and stick in the back room and stand up against the wall? And that way when this thing fails, just put a new one on the stand and move on with my life. But having a tank sitting for a long time, especially out in the elements, there's just no guarantee that that silicone is going to be trustworthy. And so, yeah, I don't know what to tell you other than I'd be really nervous. I mean, that's the truth. Is it worth drilling for an overflow box? I mean, yeah. I mean, it's just glass. You can drill glass no matter how old it is. As long as it's not tempered, you can drill it. I was asked if Canadian Reefer Girl said if she talked to the organizers of the Niagara Coral Show, would I be interested in speaking? Yeah. I believe that they were the ones that reached out to me a few months ago and then decided that it just wasn't affordable. You know, I'm not crazy expensive, but, you know, there's cost of me flying out there, a hotel room, food, and then the price of my presentation itself. And I think they decided they didn't want to do it. But, I mean, you can ask. And if they suddenly say yes and my schedule is open, then yeah, sure, I'd be happy to do it. It'd be really cool if there was timestamps on these chats so I knew where I am in the timeline. Oh my God, we have been going way too long. This thing is done. Let me scroll, see if there's anything else really important here to answer. I didn't realize it was 3:22. We've been going this for an hour and 20 minutes. People hate that. They want quick videos. My wife's new tank is going through the uglies, diatoms. She gets all ticked off when she sees it. Her tank is 150 gallons and mine is only 55 gallons and matured. Oh, I love it. You don't even want help. You just want to gloat. That's awesome. Tell your wife that we all said as well. Will feather dusters irritate other corals? Probably not. Feather dusters are kind of like neighbors and not bad neighbors. What are your Chris asks, what are your thoughts on the current state of the reef keeping hobby? Given the state of our oceans, do you believe this hobby will continue to grow or eventually become non-existent due to ... government intervention? I think there will always be people keeping animals in their homes. You know, you got dogs, cats, you got birds, and you got people with fish. You've also got people that get exotics that you're not allowed to have. Every once in a while on the news, they'll say there's a guy had a bunch of snakes in their home, and it was like the snakes you can't have in your residential neighborhood. Every once in a while hear about a guy that had bees in their backyard, but they weren't zoned for that, or some other creature. So I don't think that'll ever end. I think it'll just be harder if the government were to totally crack down. But I just don't really picture them attacking the pet industry because it's everything we buy, we pay tax on, and tax helps keep the government operational. So I think there will be certain things that are outlawed. Certain corals are being protected for whatever reason, because of extinction risks. And so they will say you can no longer get this. I mean, I'm looking at one right now in my tank that you can't buy anywhere, but still exists in the hobby and people still share it, and it's the Blue Ridge coral. And I've found it in fish stores growing in their beautiful display tanks, and it's a cool coral, but can't just buy it anywhere. So I don't think that our hobby is in trouble in that regard, but when things happen in Hawaii where they can no longer export fish, and that was one of the best, most well-documented proof that they were being removed sustainably. In other words, meaning even though we're taking fish from the ocean, the population has not dropped. And statistically, they've proven the numbers have even gone up. And yet there's groups out there that swear it's the exact opposite and complain when they go in the ocean they don't see as many tangs now as they saw in the old days. That's not a way to do math. That's like me going through my lawn saying, I used to find worms in my lawn, and I'm not finding worms anymore. So obviously there's a problem. It's like there's just, they've migrated to some other spot. But we are not the destruction of the fish and reefs. We are not. There's no way. There's just not enough of us collecting corals and fish to decimate the reefs like we're being accused of. So hopefully those with cooler heads will prevail, and they won't just believe the garbage that's being told to them, because there is some proof out there. There's some actual data that says the truth versus the emotional complaints. I mean, oh my God. In Hawaii, there are areas where snorkelers can go. And I said, hey, where's a good spot to go dive? And they said, oh, do not go where the snorkelers go. And I was like, okay, why? It's because they stomp on everything and they're killing it all. They're so busy, like, they don't even swim out. They walk on all the corals. It'll make you so mad. And so I didn't go there because, what's the point? And it makes total sense. I have watched scuba divers do terrible things in the ocean that I would never ever do as a scuba diver myself. I watched a woman coming down from the boat, and what I mean by coming down, you jump out of the boat into the water, and then you go down, and typically you want to get in the water, make sure your regulators in your mouth, your mask is secure, there's no water in the mask, and you're going to let air out of your BCD, which is the vest you wear, and it allows you to sink. And you're wearing weights, and you got a big tank on your back full of air. And so you're supposed to basically get yourself oriented, maybe come down, maybe even go head first and go down toward the reef. Swim down is the idea. This woman came down like a rock. Her tank was like a big bomb on her back, and she just came down, bam, 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 bam. And I mean, she was heading right into a coral head. And I just saw this happen. I was like, are you kidding me? And at the very last second, she was able to like flip herself and didn't hit it. And I was just, I mean, it was a miracle. And I think she just got lucky. But if you're going to go in the ocean, just like if you go into a campsite in the woods, you should never leave behind a trace that you were there. It should always look better when you leave than when you got there. If you find a little bit of trash, you pick it up and you take it and you go. And in the case of the ocean, when we go out there, we're going to explore. We're not going to poke at things and bother things. We're not going to break things off. We're not going to take treasure, trophies, and leave with them. We want to see it. And we want to see our natural reef and appreciate for what it is. And if you want to take anything, take pictures, take video. And that's it. And that's my big rant for the day. Joe just said he got an emerald crab for the first time, and he loves it. Compared to any other crab, this thing's way more interesting. Yeah, they're completely different. They're cool. And they will work on Valonia, which is bubble algae. I'm scrolling a little bit harder now. Is there a way to see if a tang is male or female? It depends on the species. And like with the Nassau tang, the back of the tail looks like a semicircle, then that would be a female. And the ones with big long streamers coming off the tail, that's a male. And this happens as they get older, you become more sure. And it's funny because Spock, I've had since 2004, and the bottom gets long and the top is short. So I think she's both. I always say she. What's the best way to get rid of overtaking mushrooms? I've tried everything. Basically, you have to rip off every bit of the tissue. And ideally, take the rock out of the tank and scrape them off and get all the rubbery tissue off so there's nothing left behind, and that spot will be gone. And I make a work tray you can set on top of your reef, and you suspend it over your tank with PVC pipes, so you can just take the rock, put it in the tray, stand right there over your tank, scrape off whatever you need to, and then put the rock back in your tank. And I know it's not convenient, but it's a lot easier than hauling it over to your sink. But there's no like simple solution. That's why people that have been in the hobby a long time know never to put mushrooms in their tanks. Oh, we're up to 132 people in here. Wow, cool. See, I always forget to check. I had to actually put the mouse over the screen to see that number. That's probably why I never notice it. And I always look too late, and then I think, oh yeah, how many did we have? And I have no idea. And YouTube won't tell me for a few days after the fact. Brandon is new to the hobby and wants to know what are some good beginner fish to fit in a 125-gallon tank. Well, I can tell you this. I love little tiny fish because you can get a lot of them. And if you get a few larger fish, they will end up ruling the tank and dominating it, and they will make all your little fish hide in the rock work, and you don't see them nearly as much. So think about that when you're shopping for fish. What will they become? How big will they become? And how aggressive are they? I like to buy things that are called reef safe. Popular fish is a clownfish. Popular fish is a hippo tang, the blue tang. Popular fish would be a lawnmower blenny. But I mean, there's so many. I mean, there's wrasses, there's anthias, there's tangs, there's I'm thinking about so many different ones that exist. Right now that my brain can't even spit them all out fast enough for you on camera. But we want reef safe. We want things to get along. So you want to consider that. You also want to make sure that those fish won't eat the corals you want to buy. So like if you're like, oh, I definitely want to have zoanthids, then you want to make sure that you don't buy a fish that eats zoanthids. One person asked if they should quarantine their cleanup crew, and another person said they quarantine everything. I don't quarantine cleanup crews. I don't even recommend quarantining a cleanup crew, because cleanup crews are there to clean up algae, and they're starving and they're ready to go. You can definitely look at them and inspect them when you buy them and make sure there's nothing weird on them, you know, a hitchhiker. But other than that, they just get acclimated and put in the tank. A lot of times the cleanup crew snails at the fish store and crabs are in their own ecosystem. They're not part of the fish system. I mean, they're not even tied to the same water. So there's the likelihood is way lower that there could be some kind of, like, let's say, ick on them. I mean, think about this. How do you get a fish out of a tank at the fish store? They catch it with a fish net, right? And then they put it in a bag, and they twist the bag off, and they carry it to the counter. You buy snails, what do? They reach into the tank with their hand, and they get the snails. They don't use a net. They may use a net for shrimp, or they may use their hands also. But it's just, I always, the fish stores I go to, all the snails are in their own snail ecosystem. They've got shrimp and crabs in another section, and the fish are way over there, kind of separated. So I've just never had anything weird happen. I mean, I've been in this hobby 20 years, and I've not had weird things break out of my tank after I put in a cleanup crew. And you can be sure I've put in a lot of cleanup crew critters in my tanks over the years. So that's my personal opinion. Oh, by the way, one person said it's shocking how bad, what did they say exactly? I just saw it a second ago. So many divers with shocking buoyancy. Buoyancy is the ability to balance and maintain the exact height in the ocean. And I mean, okay, so I'm going to go off on tangent here for a second. Fish. When I look at this clownfish right here in my tank, he is just sitting in my tank. He's not even really swimming. He's hovering at that exact spot. And it's so amazing to me, it makes me think of deep space and an astronaut just floating in one spot. And I love that weird comparison that my brain makes with fish and deep space. I mean, because ocean is its own space, when you think about it compared to land. And when we divers go in the ocean, we are swimming at the surface, or we dive down and then we hover, or we dive deeper and we hover. I mean, that's the whole point. If you are just going down and up like a yo-yo, you're going to be sick. You're going to get the bends. We are actually trained to learn buoyancy in the beginning. But without a lot of practice, you're bad at it. And if you're not weighted properly, like you don't have enough weights on your body when you jump in the ocean, you can't sink far enough, you can't sink down, or you keep bobbing up, which is kind of the same thing as you can't go down. And it's a real thing. You want to be properly balanced, and there's actually let's call it a merit badge for advanced buoyancy. And I think it's a great class, and I think anyone that's diving should definitely take it, including myself. I did take it, and I'd like to take it again. I'd really like to fine-tune my buoyancy to perfection, but it would help if I didn't dive just 2 times a year. If I was diving every week like a dive master, it'd be super easy. I just go down and blah, 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 and I'm a fish. But no, I go down there, and I've got all my gear, and I got to keep track of everything and stay alive. But it would be really good to work on your buoyancy control and be really good so you don't have to grab onto things and handle corals and damage things. So be a fish. That's my point. I see a lot of people talking about fish, mushrooms now. I must be catching up with the conversation. Tina says, I keep Florida Recordia and my zinnias on their own tower that doesn't touch anything. And yeah, that's part of it. But you know what mushrooms do? Mushrooms will spin around and around and around to where their trunk, their neck, becomes very thin, and it snaps off, and the mushroom will then float away and grab on somewhere else. So there's no guarantees when you put mushrooms in your tank that they can't end up somewhere else. So keep that in mind. What fish eat zoas? Hippotangs are really known for being aggressive with zoas and biting them right off the rocks. And I had some beautiful mean greens, which I mentioned a while back on this channel. And I had a hippotang that was constantly gnawing on those things to where they pulled down on the rock so hard it looked like they were tattooed to the rock. And when that fish was no longer in my tank, they all came off the rock and extended and were beautiful and fluffy again. And it was amazing they survived that ordeal. But yeah, hippo tangs are known to be problematic with zoas. Let's see. Dustin says, I bought an AquaClear 110 hang on back and it's noisy. How can I get it to quiet down? Or is there a hang on back filter that is really quiet? What is actually the source of the sound that's bothering you? If it's the water pouring back in the tank, you might be able to do something. If it's the motor itself sounds like a pencil sharpener, you may not be able to solve it. So you have to look into that. 508 says that his cleanup crew brought velvet into his tank, and he believes it came in on their shells, just like a parasite, and killed the whole tank. I'm sorry to hear that. I mean, I've never had anything remotely close to that happen in my tanks, so I mean, okay, let's say you put your brand new hungry, starving snails in a quarantine tank. What are they going to eat? And how long are they going to be in your quarantine tank? I guess that's the next step. Are you going to put in sheets of nori? Are you going to move rocks into the tank, you know, that they can snack on while they're waiting? Are you just going to hope they live long enough to when you finally put them in the tank, they're still going? I mean, that's the thing. And there's a lot of coral dips that say don't put invertebrates in it. So you have to keep that in mind. Oh my God, I got to the bottom of the chat. Someone says rabbitfish will eat zoas. I've never had a rabbitfish, but that doesn't surprise me. And this hippo tang has been eating acans and SPS. I have heard of them going after acans, that's true. So, acans are so juicy, I'm not surprised. All right, guys. We are an hour and 38 minutes into this stream. Well, actually a little bit less. I started, 4 minutes late. But I really appreciate you guys tuning in every single week. We do these live streams every Saturday at 2 o'clock. And next Saturday, there'll be another one. Actually, I think there's going to be another one every week for like the next month. And I'll need to come up with a topic for next week. I hope you guys enjoyed pegging. And if you try it out for yourself, let me know how it works for you. I don't see why you wouldn't be happy. It's a pretty neat process, and it's so flexible to making your life simpler. Clean your skimmer. Clean the neck of the skimmer. Clean that cup. Dump it out. And do all your water testing today. I already started my test, but I ran out of time. Had to start the stream. I'm going to finish my tests. I can tell you right now my alkaline in my tank is 8, which I like it higher, so that was weird. But it's my own fault. I didn't test last week. And phosphates are up, which I mentioned already. Salinity is 1.024, and behind me it's 1.026. And I'm not surprised that this tank is 1.024 because I have not put salt water in this tank in 18 months. And it's every time I take anything out, I take some salt water out and then I replace it with RODI. So of course the salinity is going to slowly come down, and water changes are going to bring it back up because I will put in salty water to replace. Matter of fact, I'll probably top off with some salt water to bring it up. But I haven't because I want to ICP this. I really want to know what's in this tank. Even though it's doing great, you know, it's really doing well. I've been really lucky for the last 6 months or so. I've been loving my tank. And in historical, in the history of my being in the hobby, usually there's 3 weeks that the tank looks great and the rest of the year I hate my tank. And I've been really happy with this tank for the last 6 months, and that's weird. It's nice to wake up each day and say, well, it still looks good. Okay, I'm happy. So I just want to keep this going. I don't want to mess with it. And I do want to kind of like fine tune some numbers a little bit. But, the bottom line is the corals are doing well in the water they're in now. So I don't know if I should even mess with success. Casino, do you test every week? That is the whole point of why I tell everyone to test their water. It is a matter of testing every week, and sometimes I tell everyone and then I still don't get it done. And I'm keep thinking, okay, I'll get it tomorrow, and then the test kits are sitting there in plain sight, and I just don't make myself do it. So I'm trying to make myself do it every Saturday. So I'm not only asking you to do it, but I'm asking myself to do it. Yes, I said to try pegging. Why are you guys turning into something dirty? This is a reef channel. God, this must be the end of the live stream. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Bye!